Welcome to SouthCoast Matters. I'm Paul Latendra.
And I'm Julie Taylor, and SouthCoast Matters is a public access television program where we bring together business leaders, civic leaders, and citizens to discuss how we can have a positive impact on our South Coast communities.
And we try to have interesting conversations with some intelligent people. We hope they're intelligent. Today we are fortunate to have back Evan Falchuk, founder and director of the United Independent Party.
He's a successful entrepreneur and served for 14 years on the executive leadership team of a Boston-based global healthcare company called Best Doctors, Inc. And you played the lead role in growing the company from 9 employees to 600. That's incredible.
Thank you.
And Evan graduated from Penn Law School and worked with a law firm for a few years before joining the family firm of Best Doctors. Has 2 daughters, 1 son, 1 wife. Just 1 wife?
Yes.
Good, good. And 1 dog.
Correct.
Great looking dog. I saw a picture
Thank
of the
you.
dog. Evan, United Independent Party, I'll quote, is dedicated to greater diversity of modern progressive ideas combined with fiscally sane solutions. It seems redundant. I mean, Democrats are saying they're progressively they're socially progressive and fiscally conservative or fiscally responsible. A lot of liberal Democrats, centrist Democrats, and centrist Republicans in Massachusetts are claiming that. Our governor claims that. And I saw a libertarian running for president the other day, and he's claiming to be socially progressive and fiscally responsible.
Right.
What's the difference? Are we all the same? Should we all be in one party?
Well, we're all Americans, and
That's
most,
good to know.
which is
Doesn't feel that
important.
way.
Most people feel as if those labels don't apply to the old parties anymore. People feel as if the Democrats are about spending money and that the Republicans are about telling you how to live your life. And they're saying, where do I go if I feel like money should be spent wisely, but I'm socially more liberal? I don't think we should be fighting culture wars anymore. And that was the whole idea behind creating the United Independent Party back in 2012 when we started this process, and why we need a structure. Most voters are not enrolled in either party. Most candidates run for office unopposed these days. And we end up with these elections like what we're seeing right now on the national level that are increasingly disconnected and perhaps extreme when you think about the things that Trump is saying, but where people don't like the candidates. And you say, what does this do to our democracy if we can't have people engaged in it? How is it ever going to change? And to me, the only way to do that is to build a structure to get new people elected so we can have contested elections and a revived democratic process.
Do people not like the candidates because media is just destroying both candidates and have been destroying both candidates from day one? Whether it's Donald Trump or
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. I mean, Hillary's been publicly scrutinized for
Decades.
15 to 20 years. I mean, probably more so than any human being who's ever been on the planet. I mean, she's been scrubbed clean.
Right. Well, but media has been around for a long time, and I don't think we've ever had an election where the candidates are this disliked. The media is not the reason that Donald Trump is a bigot. That's who he is.
No, but
but the challenge is this, is that we have an electoral process that's dominated by these 2 old parties. And those 2 old parties are, you think about this from a business standpoint, you ever see a business process work, the outcome is always the reflection of how the whole process is designed. Right. So the outcome we've got right now in our Democratic and Republican Party primaries is perfectly designed to lead to these kinds of elections.
Yeah. What does the United Independent Party bring to the table that?
We've got to have contested elections, and we have to build things from the local level up. There is no top-down solution. So when we started this party, we recognized, and I learned the hard way, that the system really is skewed. It really is set up in a way that makes it so that if you want to run for office and you want to get elected at the state level, you've got to be in a party. There's different rules for fundraising. There's different rules for access to the ballot. There's different rules for how you can share data. There's different rules for how you can coordinate campaigns. And there's a reason why, at a time when people say they don't like Democrats and Republicans, that 100% of our legislators are Democrats and Republicans. Mostly Democrats, but it doesn't matter. They're all in a party. there is no avenue for a plain old independent candidate to win, which is why we needed to create a party structure in order to do it. So we're here to be that platform for contested elections. We recently had Scott Harshbarger, former Democratic Attorney General of Massachusetts, join the United Independent Party with a view towards helping us make sure that we stay an official party in Massachusetts, with all the benefits that that brings and the possibility of supporting candidates and getting contested elections.
In the contested elections, I think in listening to former Attorney General Harshbarger talking about this, it keeps the person in the seat accountable to the people. They can't just get in that seat and think, oh, nobody's ever going to run against me. I have a big old war chest and I can do whatever I want.
It's tough to know what they're doing anyway.
Right.
I mean, most of the legislative votes are verbal, aren't they?
They are, and it's part of the problem. You know, if everything's done on a voice vote, you don't know how your representative voted, and maybe they like it that way, but I think for our democracy, we shouldn't stand for it. Even on important issues, initially the transgender equality bill that was recently passed, when it came out of committee, the committee vote was confidential. We don't know how those legislators voted. Now, they ended up having a recorded vote on the House floor, but the fact that that's even a notion that we can have secret votes in Massachusetts should not be allowed. It won't change because the people in power right now are perfectly happy to have it that way. So we have to elect new people, or at least have contested elections. And as Attorney General Harshbarger put it recently when I was in a radio interview with him, he said, look, United Independent Party candidates don't have a right to win, but they do have a right to be heard.
That's right.
And for our democracy to work well, we need to have two voices and have people having a battle of ideas in the marketplace in order to make sure we get the right result.
And one of the reasons why so many elected officials are afraid to take a stand on whatever it is, they're worrying about getting reelected. They're worrying about who's going to donate to their campaign if they come out on a certain issue. So I think in some ways they've lost their spine when it comes to some of these really tough issues. I think they should just vote, and it is what it is. This is why I voted this way. And we think, I can't remember who we were talking about one time, said that, you know, if I can explain why I took a certain position, well, if the voters, you know, they can respect that.
Right. It's the old question of why do you have the job in the first place if you don't want to use it to do something?
Right.
If you're afraid of the reaction of voters, at least be your own person, stand on principle, you know, and vote the way that you think is right. Part of the challenge is that voter participation has been going down over the last number of years, and it's really low now. And what that means is there's just a small core of voters that participate in primary elections in particular. What it means is that those individual voters that may have views that are out of touch with most people, they end up having an outsized influence over how policy gets made and who gets elected. So you would think that in a state like Massachusetts, where we like to think of ourselves as very progressive, that there'd be a lot of issues we could just deal with very easily. It turns out that that's not the case, and that's because we have those kinds of challenges.
What is the spread of registered voters in Massachusetts regarding Republican, Democrat, and unenrolled?
So we think of Massachusetts as a very Democratic state, but only 35% of voters in Massachusetts are registered Democrats. Only 11% are registered Republicans. 11%. And
so that's 46, 54%?
That's right, are unenrolled. So they're not in any party at all. Now, a lot of people say, I'm unenrolled, that means I'm not answerable to anybody. The trouble is, because of the way our system works, it requires that parties have a certain amount of enrollment in them in order to be official parties. So in Massachusetts, you've got to have 1%, which is 43,000 people. That's our target. We've got to get there by this November. We're at well over 20,000 already, and we're working hard to get the rest of them. Not being in a party does not make you truly independent. It doesn't make sure that we get candidates running for office who can represent you. 2/3 of the representatives running this year in the state legislature are running unopposed. So that means they'll just walk right back into their former jobs. They may all be really good people and be deserving of re-election, but it is not a recipe for accountability. It's not a recipe for ensuring that they are responsive to the needs of their constituents. And certainly in a situation where we have a speaker who's so powerful and who requires loyalty to his particular agenda, it doesn't mean that they're representing even their own constituents.
Right, because you still, once you get up there, have to fight for chairmanships and committees that you want to be on that will help out your constituents, and you need to be on the good side of the speaker in order to have that happen.
And that's a fact. You don't hear a lot of representatives talk about that, but you know, when the speaker went back on his word about having a term limit on himself, there were a few people that bravely voted against him, and they were not given the kinds of treatment that they would like to have gotten as a result. Look, it's a kind of complacency and entitlement to power that we really shouldn't be standing for in a state like Massachusetts. We have so many great things here and so many great people, especially so many young people that are just looking for a way to get involved in our political process, but see it and say, I've got to compromise my own personhood, my own integrity, my own principles in order to participate, and they're turned off by it. That's something that we should fix.
And it seems like there's an awful lot of issues relative to the younger people that are at stake right now in the Commonwealth, that if we don't correct them, we're going to lose the younger voters, we're going to lose the younger population that will help us grow economically and take care of us, people that are aging here. And
correct.
It's a serious problem.
Is there an ideology that that you guys are embracing, that we're the party of pragmatic socialist?
We're not socialists.
Okay.
Although I've been called something like that by Howie Carr.
I'm sure you have
who
been.
cares?
Yeah, I know. But it's just interesting that's how you get viewed. But look, we can look back and say, make America great again, which is the Donald Trump thing. I think that we have to look to the future to decide how we want our present to look. And we have to know that in the 21st century, in order to have a thriving, vibrant economy, we've got to have people that are educated, who can afford to live here, who are able to move around and get places they need to get to. And what that means is we need to spend money on education. Our schools are not properly funded. It's going to cost some billions of dollars to do it. We have to figure out where that money is going to come from and get it. There can't be any excuses for this. We need $7 billion to fix the T. There's no plan to get $7 billion to fix the T. This is fundamental to how people live their lives.
And we need a South Coast rail in Southeast.
Yeah, absolutely. I've long been in favor of that. And it ties to one of the important things that sounds wonkish, but it's really important, which is the production of housing. We need to have lots more homes built that are close to transit, that people can afford to live in, not so much of the high-end housing that gets built. And in order to do that, we need to have significant reforms of the way that, again, our schools are funded, so that cities and towns say it's in our best interest to construct lots of homes. So this is a forward-thinking kind of agenda. Now, anyone can have policy agendas, but so much of what we see is not tied to a larger vision. And again, that vision has to be, people have to be able to afford to live here, got to be able to afford to do business here. We can't have companies like GE coming in and getting $150 million in tax breaks and then find out that schools don't have the money they need just to buy supplies for the students, let alone teachers to be properly compensated for their work. These are the types of things that we should be having a robust conversation and argument about in Massachusetts, but instead we end up with half measures.
I think part of the problem is there's so much noise, and there is a lot of noise, that the average voter is overwhelmed with the amount of noise. And it's a matter of cherry picking sound bites. And I think the average voter wants, we're Americans, we want fairness. We want things to be fair. We say we do, but our perception of fairness when we ask the average voter will be, I want to pay low or reasonably low taxes. I want to have the best school systems. I want to have the best roads. I want to have good public transportation, good housing alternatives, probably some better higher education, a good safety net. But I don't want to pay a lot of money for all that stuff.
Okay. Well, those are not unreasonable, and I understand they cost money, and I'm in favor of all those things. However, the challenge is this. We have a law that says schools are supposed to be funded properly. Chapter 70 describes how it's done, and it's not being followed. So this isn't the standard of saying, oh, we've got to have this very high aspiration for how much money is available. We should just follow the law. And I don't think it's too much to ask of our elected officials. They should follow the law and properly fund our schools. I think that there's an enormous amount of money that's able to be found and spent when it comes to companies like GE coming to Massachusetts, $150 million, film tax credit, hundreds of thousands of dollars per job. This money is easy to find for our elected officials. And in fact, when Governor Baker gave the State of the Commonwealth address and said that the State of the Commonwealth was strong, he did that right after talking about how excited he was about GE coming here, and everybody stood and applauded. Democrats and Republicans. Behind the scenes, when we see that partisanship on the surface, behind the scenes, it's all the same when it comes to taking care of those big corporate donors.
Film tax credit, go back on that. What is that now?
There's a tax credit that's given if you decide to film a production here in Massachusetts, and the cost of that ends up being some hundreds of thousands of dollars per job. It's something that there's been an effort to try to get rid of in the legislature, but it didn't go anywhere. And it's just an example of the kinds of giveaways to these big profitable companies that the government should be in no business of giving.
Now, they haven't actually quantified how much that brings in to the Commonwealth with those tax credits to show that it actually produces economic value. I mean, they say it does, but have they actually quantified that?
This is the truth with all of these tax credits and tax subsidies that go to these big companies. And GE is such a prime example of this, because GE said they wanted to be in a place where they could be around entrepreneurial companies, entrepreneurial people, an ecosystem of startups, and they were in an office park in Connecticut. Well, if you were trying to decide where to go, Boston would be on one of the really, really, really short lists of places that you would want to end up. And there's not many other places that even come close to what Boston has to offer. They said they didn't come for the tax break, but GE as a company has a huge division inside of it designed to extract tax concessions from governments. So they put it on the table, and we were taken to the cleaners as taxpayers. It's a lot of money. You know, one of the Globe recently wrote about this, that they're building a helipad, so for helicopters to land, paid for by taxpayers, for GE. Now the other side, the mayor's office said, well, that helipad will be open to the public, so anybody can land their helicopters, or not just GE. So when you guys land, the good news is the community access helicopter can land there. But it's these kinds of giveaways. GE has $100 billion in the bank. It's true about so many of these other companies, and it's a philosophy and a vision of how government should work. I think government needs to break down barriers and help smaller businesses, and again, help people afford to live here. There's other people who see government as a way to give out jobs to their friends, or as a way to give out largesse to people that don't need it.
Right, right. But just bringing some of these big corporations in and bringing the high-paying jobs that go with it is just making it more difficult for average people to live in the area.
That's correct. And I also think that the driver of economic growth in the 21st century are these small and medium-sized businesses. A lot of them are startups, and a lot of them struggle with healthcare costs. They struggle with the cost of paying workers who a worker can't work for you unless they can afford to do so.
Right.
And if they have to pay a lot of rent to live in an expensive home where there's not an effective transit option, so they got to drive. And they
What's the average rent in Boston now?
Oh, it's like, isn't it like $2,800?
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Yeah.
It's pretty high, and there's so many people that are spending more than a third of their income on housing. I mean, it's a remarkable number. This is not a good way to build an economy. It works very well for the people that can afford it, so that part's okay, but for everybody else, it causes trouble.
I think I recently read you had to make $125,000 to afford rent in Boston.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
How do we keep the young people here if that's what we have to pay? So your United Independent Party's got a lot of issues to work on.
We all do, no question about it. And I think what we see the United Independent Party's role is to make sure they're being raised and that we're insisting on a real conversation about whatever the subject is. No vague sound bites, no vague platitudes. It may not be the most exciting thing in the world sometimes, but it actually is the most needed thing in the world. You know, we're used to seeing in our politics these days people throwing bombs at each other. We really need our people to be able to talk in real terms about what's going on and deal with them like adults.
Right. So now it takes money for any party to operate.
Yep.
Now here's the dirty word. How do you go about funding your party and then staying true to your principles?
Well, the staying true to our principles part is not hard. Although one thing that I do tell people is that if you see UIP elected officials or candidates or people like me suddenly going back on the things that we said that we're about, you need to call us on it. And you need to play back tapes of me, like if suddenly I said, you know something, GE and other companies like that should get huge tax breaks. You should be able to play back that clip of me and say, well, what happened? You say, well, did you get money from these people? And I should be not supported by people that see that. We had a candidate for office this year. We've got a number of candidates running in this election cycle for the state legislature, and this candidate failed to get the number of signatures he needed to get on the ballot, which happens, and then he decided to blame the clerk for the reason that he was excluded, that he was being discriminated against because he was gay and because he was a member of our party. I immediately was out publicly saying I thought that he was acting like, I didn't use this word, I used a much worse word, but he was being a jerk, and it was unacceptable behavior, and this isn't the kind of person that we need associated with our party. That to me is the kind of leadership we should see from elected officials. And so when you talk about how to fund campaigns, sure, we need to raise money, and it's a challenge as a new party to go get money to do this, but it should never be at the cost of what we're about. Never. We have to be able to fulfill our goals without compromising our principles.
You've personally been very generous in funding the party too.
I have.
I know I did some research. you're well over 1 million into it, if I remember
I have.
correctly.
I mean, I'm passionate about it. I feel very strongly about how important our democracy is, and I get very concerned when I see the things that are happening. People not running for office, people not participating in politics, people not even registering to vote, let alone voting. And anything that we can do as a party and that I can do personally to make sure that that happens, I feel obligated to do it.
What do you think needs to be done in order to raise awareness about how important it is to vote, especially in primaries, since those are the candidates we end up picking in the general election, and as you said earlier, driven usually by the fringe of the major parties?
Wouldn't it be great if we started really teaching civics again in schools?
That would be awesome.
That would be
I'm all
really
on
good.
board with that.
Yeah.
I'm still learning civics, and I'm 66 years
Me
old,
too.
and I never learned basics.
Well, see, I think that's the problem. So if the United Independent Party could get behind some sort of legislative action to push that back into the schools, or
Right.
through some sort of other civic program, because we put so much into the schools, but ideally that's the perfect place to teach it.
Absolutely. I think we should have automatic voter registration in Massachusetts. If we're not going to have that, the schools should be encouraging the kids to go and register to vote. We've done quite a lot of work with schools to say, can we come in and do a nonpartisan voter registration drive? We just want people to register to vote. You can pre-register if you're going to be 18 by the time of the election, and we've been encouraging young people to do that. But we have to be teaching that in schools, and we have to also make sure that young people see the opportunity to participate in politics as something that's good, something that they can aspire to, not something that's somehow dishonest or bad for their future careers. But also for people of all ages, because there's an enormous wealth of knowledge and understanding and wisdom at people across the age spectrum, and people that have time to re-engage themselves in civic life ought to have an opportunity to do it, get involved. Believe me, there's enough uncontested elections out there for every person who's interested in running for office to run for something.
Exactly.
And United Independent Party is a platform for people to go and do that.
If I were an unenrolled voter and I heard you and I thought, okay, I want to join the UIP, how would I do it? Would I go down to the town hall? And
You can do it that way. You can also, it's even easier, you can go to the Secretary of State's website. If you go to the unitedindependent.org website, we've got a link to it, but the Secretary of State has online voter registration. It takes you less than 5 minutes. If you were going to change parties, you basically have to re-register to vote. It's the same process, but it takes less than 5 minutes. If you ever want to leave because it doesn't fit you, we say, hey, try us. Not a lot of parties will say that to you, but that's what we're about. Just join. That number, you're lending us your voter registration. Help us get to that 1% figure by this October, by late October. That makes sure that the United Independent Party stays a permanent part of the landscape, so we can have lots of people involved in our politics that represent these kinds of values.
Now, how often do you have to recertify your, it's probably not the right word, but to get to those 43,000, is that every election cycle you have to get to that?
It's a bit of an arcane process. It's a great question. So we became an official party when I got more than 3% of the vote in the 2014 election. You get to keep that for 2 years. This is a little screwy. I don't know how else to put it. Then you have to get 1% of people enrolled by the next 2 years. Okay, and if you do, then you stay a permanent party. So for example, the Republicans who have only 11% of voters, they could run no candidates from now until forever and they would stay an official party. We've got to get past that 1% threshold.
Is that strictly a Massachusetts?
Yep.
now, do you just have a one-shot deal to get to that 1%?
Nope. Yeah, if for some reason we weren't there in November, we just keep enrolling people, and once we get above that 1%, we're an official party again. Other states have different rules. I was recently talking, there's an independent party in Oregon that's managed over almost a decade to get 5% of voters enrolled in their party. Wow. It's taken them a long time. But now it is so needed to have some independent voice and an avenue for fresh people to get involved. And I think many other states we're going to start to see these things emerge. We've been in touch with people from a number of other states. Parties exist at the level of states. It's one of the big challenges in our country about making this kind of change. But the fact that it will take some number of years to change this doesn't mean we shouldn't be working on it and making it happen. I think that the Republican Party is dead in New England. It's obviously still alive, but it doesn't have a future to it. Right. And so the question becomes, if we need to have at least a two-party democracy, what will be the counterbalance to the Democrats who are not going away? And the United Independent Party is here with that vision of building that structure to be that counterbalance.
I'm a Democrat, and I agree with you 1,000%. I think we need a united independent party.
Thank you.
I think we need Republicans to stay alive, too, and I'd like to see some vitality.
Yeah, I think multi-party democracy is healthy and good.
I lived in Canada. They had 5, 6 parties, made for great discussions.
People say that the United States is naturally a two-party system, and I think that's obviously wrong, and here's why. There are so many rules that are put in place to protect the dominance of the Democrats and the Republicans. If it was natural, you wouldn't need all these rules. It's not natural. People have a wide diversity of views and ideas, and they should be allowed to organize in ways that allow them to have those views represented in our government. Right now, it's either one or the other, and no choice in between.
And it seems like those two sides don't even talk to each other anyway.
Right.
It's crazy. We've lost that civil discourse amongst the parties.
I think a third party,
said.
even on a U.S. level, would you'd get a more parliamentary, you'd have both parties vying for the small party's support.
Correct.
To push them over the top, which is what happens in European countries.
Here in Massachusetts, it takes 16 votes in the House to require a recorded vote. And most of these things are done on voice votes. So if we had a caucus, it wouldn't have to just be UIP members, but if we had a caucus of 16 members willing to stand up and demand recorded votes, that would really change the dynamic in the House. That would be a really important change. It doesn't take a lot to get there, but that's, to your point, having another party makes that possible.
Baby steps. Constant, consistent baby steps leads to constant, consistent progress.
There you go.
Well, I think it's important that people take a trip when you've got the time. You too, Paul, if you haven't already done it. Just head into the legislature when they're voting, and you can see all this stuff going on. It's crazy.
I've never been to the State House.
Oh, no, it's lots of fun. Lots of fun.
It's nice. It's a nice building.
Yeah, I've been.
Look, I had
in the 60s, I protested outside the State House.
Did you?
Got Vietnam War stuff, I'm sure. Yeah.
Sure. Look, I had a representative say to me in the course of this, in a candid conversation, he said, you got to be more patient with this change. He said, this building has been here for 300 years and it's not going away anytime soon. And I didn't say this to him. I said, but my thought was, this building has not been here for 300 years. It's been here for a lot less than that. And I'm sure you could have found representatives in the Roman Senate 2,000 years ago to tell you, hey, we're not going anywhere. But we have an obligation to do something to restore and revive our democracy, and it requires bringing in good people who feel a sense of urgency about representing the people. That's what's missing.
Right, representing the people.
I agree. I think my generation's not done a good job of setting the table for your generation and future generations. I think we're handed a lot more than we're handing off as when we begin to exit. And I think.
Well, you're not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, I'm not myself,
Yeah.
but my generation's getting to the point where.
But why do you say that, Paul?
We were handed great highways, fairly good trains, telephone poles that were only 40 years old when we were born. We're leaving behind 100-year-old telephone poles, trains that are 150 years old, highways that are 50 years old, water systems, electrical systems that haven't been updated in 50 or 100 years. We haven't put back what we've used up. We've done a great job of using up, but we haven't done a good job of
there's
putting
a lot.
back.
I hear a lot of that talk from voters out there for sure. And when you look and you say, it wasn't that long ago, 40 years ago, we were sending people to the moon. We had all these aspirations of things that we could do in our country, and it's stalled.
And this conversation is going to stall because we're out of time, Evan.
Well, we have an opportunity to build for a better future, Paul.
We
so
do.
I'm here
Okay.
for you.
Give us one more quick 10-second on how to join the party.
Go to unitedindependent.org. There's a link there over to the Secretary of State's website. Take you less than 5 minutes. Lend us your enrollment.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. I'm Paul Latendra. Thank you for joining us on SouthCoast Matters. I'm going to read the outro here. And we're very grateful to Evan Falchuk, founder of the United Independent Party. And thank you to Ben Fortier, Kim Murphy, and Walter Sabino at TCAM TV for their assistance and guidance.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice night. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.